I do like to record on both, Joe, just because if I have to
recording in progress.
Thank you.
Ooh.
If you have to share on, I like this way because if I have to share anything, show up on Zoom, I'll save it later, so it actually shows what I'm showing on my screen. So we'll do both, just in case. Okay. I always like to have a backup. But again, welcome to Bob the Father. This is again an open forum. It's open to any discussion at all, any topic, any question. I'll try to answer to the best of my ability. Last week we kind of went on, we're talking more about all things new, and I gave a lot more of my opinion, I think, last week than really, fact, which I don't know if it's good or bad or whatever, so people can take that for what it's worth. But yeah, any questions, anything you want to start? You want to start off with anything?
Well, I've got a question. So in church, when you said, thinking about the sins that you have that you want to forgive, when is it during the Mass that those are actually forgiven, and what type of sins are actually forgiven?
Yeah, good question. So we have this thing in part of the introductory rite. It's called the penitential rite, right? Mm-hmm. So usually there's in the Novus Order there's three forms of that. The first form, which is also used in the extraordinary form, is what they call the Confiteor, right? So I confess to Almighty God, to my brothers and sisters, right? The rubric states there should be some time for silence for people to recall their sins at that point, right? And so the sins we're talking about in those aspects really can be any sin, but at the very end of it is there is an absolution of sorts. So we have the Confiteor. The other type would be what we call the tropes, right? So typically the standard one is you were sent to heal the contrite of heart, Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, Lord have mercy. There's a shorter version which I started using a little bit last year around ordinary time. I started again because have mercy on us, O Lord, for we sinned against you. Show us, Lord, mercy, grant us your salvation. Those are all three forms of the penitential rite. And so at that moment, while you're saying that prayer or before the absolution is given, Almighty God, have mercy on us, forgive us our sins, bring us to everlasting life. That's the time you would recall your sins to be forgiven. Now, we understand that mortal sins cannot be forgiven at that point, right? The sins that can be forgiven, which with that in line with the reception of the Eucharist, would be venial sins, right? So in other words, that penitential rite is a time to recall the venial sins you've committed and offer them up, right, in contrition. And then when you receive the Eucharist, those sins would be forgiven. Okay.
Okay. This is just, I'm trying to reiterate, see if I got it right.
Yeah.
So it's once the Eucharist is when they're actually forgiven, because that's
Correct.
When you've done the penance, that's when you've done the sacrifice, the whole.
Yes, yeah, because everything's in conjunction with that sacrifice of the Mass, right? So,
okay.
So the reception of the Eucharist forgives the sins.
Okay.
Right,
okay.
But the sins that are forgiven are the ones you recall during the penitential rite. Okay.
Okay.
And again, the sins that are forgiven, they're not mortal sins. Mortal sins have to go through sacramental confession, but venial sins would definitely be forgiven by the reception of the Eucharist. But they have to be the ones you call to mind. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize that, right? Because when we go through a penitential rite, the whole purpose of that is that you bring those venial sins to the altar to be forgiven through the reception of the Eucharist.
This is really the first time I've heard.
I know, most people it is.
But you don't get the same graces as you would when you go to confession.
Right, because the grace you receive from confession, right, is reconciliation with God due to the harm of mortal sin. Right? So the Eucharist does forgive sins, that's very true.
Can your sins be forgiven if you didn't recall them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the purpose of that moment the purpose of that moment in the penitential rite is to recall those sins. Right? Now, so here's the thing, right? Just like in confession, if you don't, let's say, remember them, right? God would still know the difference and be able to forgive those regardless, right? But perhaps if you recall them, the next time you go to Mass, it would be a good time to offer that up at that point. In the same way when you come to confession, if you forget your sin but you remember it later, you should still confess that. Not so much for the sins being forgiven, but for your own benefit of unburden yourself of those sins, right? Because there's a psychological and emotional aspect of confessing your sins. That's one of the benefits of confession. It's not only the sacramental grace, but just this unburdening of those things that you've done. So in the same respect, if you're talking about venial sins in Mass that you recall, maybe you forgot them, but you recall them later and you bring back to Mass the next day or next week, whatever, good. That's good. But yeah, the intention really is what matters there, right? So if I recall some things, I stubbed my toe and said a curse word. Okay, I didn't really mean to say the curse word, but I just kind of did it. Okay. I got caught in traffic. I got a little upset. Okay, well, okay, great. Again, when we talk about the mortal sins, there needs to be deliberation of the mind and an act of the will, right? Those are how we define mortal sin.
As opposed to a knee-jerk reaction.
Exactly, right? Which would be more venial. Still bad, not good, but there's no deliberation involved in that, which means there's no mortality involved with it. Okay. I mean, even if you look at the cases of murder, could murder be a venial sin? Well, yeah, maybe, right? It kind of depends on the person, what their intentions are, what they know, and if there was any deliberation involved with that, right? So again, we have this understanding when it comes to sin that there are gradations of that. But the sacrament of confession is necessary for the mortal ones. But but reception of the Eucharist does absolve you of venial sin. But they have to be the sins you recall at the penitential rite willingly.
So how come you don't get the graces for that? How come you don't?
Well, what do you mean by graces?
Well, you get special graces going to confession.
Correct.
So how come you wouldn't get them during the Mass then? Because
so we're talking about so let me maybe to make a distinction.
Okay.
So you're saying if I have venial sins that go to confession, and I have venial sins that receive the Eucharist, do I receive the same grace? Is that what you're asking? In a way, yes. But the difference may be your sins are forgiven, but you may not receive in the reception of the Eucharist the same grace as you would in penance to overcome those sins, right? Because that's one of the graces of the sacrament of reconciliation, is not only are you absolved of any mortal sin to reconcile you with God and the community, you're also given grace to overcome those things in the sacrament of reconciliation.
Don't we have a prayer that's I'm trying to remember the wording, but isn't there a prayer that we say that, it's not the same wording, of course, as when we're in confession, but that, we are sorry for those sins.
Okay, what are you saying though, in Mass or in confession?
In Mass. In Mass.
Well, we have the penitential.
I'm confused with all that. I'm not sure.
Well, so I'm trying to think of the wording that would be used. Yeah, that's the penitential rite. That's what we're talking about. The penitential rite. That's what we're talking about.
So isn't that? I mean, that would be the same type of thing as at the end of the confessional when we're saying our reconciliation with you.
Okay, now our terminology is being confused.
I know.
Okay, so you're saying, when the priest gives you a penance, right?
Oh.
So a priest gives you a penance in the sacrament of confession, correct?
Okay.
And what's the purpose of that penance?
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, the purpose of the penance is to actually reconcile you with the community. It's an act of justice.
Okay.
But it's also a sign of your repentance of not trying to do those things again, right? Recalling of God's love for you that you're not going to do those things. That's different than the penitential rite. Okay. The words of the penitential rite are for us to actually bring to mind those things that we've done, so we can offer them in the Mass and receive forgiveness of those venial sins. Like I said, the difference would be in the reception of the Eucharist, you don't necessarily receive the grace to overcome those sins, right? That happens through the sacrament of reconciliation.
Because we don't have the penance.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Good. No, it's good. It's good to make you have to be very clear about the terminology, right?
Right,
yeah.
right.
Because you're in a way you are receiving the grace of forgiveness. You are in the Eucharist and in confession. But confession allows you to actually, part of the sacramental grace of confession is to overcome those sins. Whereas you don't necessarily receive that in the reception of the Eucharist. Okay.
Now,
Good.
people that you know, I do it at times. I'm not real good at it. I'm not good at fasting, except for, you know, like that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, on the norm. But, you know, if a person, like in the Bible, how they would say, well, then they go through the fasting, or they, you know, wear their sackcloth, and they, you know, just eat the bread and water and stuff like that. I mean, would that be, if we did that ourselves, would that be our penance by that or not?
Okay, so when
Because we would be.
penance. There is a indulgences associated with those penances, right?
Okay.
So acts of penance do bring about certain remittance of temporal punishment. Okay, but how much penance? If I were to go and actually wear a sackcloth suit or hair vest or something, and sit in ashes for a day and not eat anything, how much temporal punishment would be remitted because of that? I don't know. But I do know that if I went to confession and a priest gave me absolution, then he gave me a penance to reconcile me to the community, right? I know that whatever I did, that moment I did that penance, all my temporal punishment would be removed, right? Okay. Until I sin again or do something stupid, right? Of course. So yeah, the acts of penance can do that, but there's no guarantee as far as like how much, right? Is that like a year off of purgatory? Is that 3 seconds? I don't know, right?
Well,
nobody really knows.
It's like when you do after a rosary, we'll do an extra Our Father, Hail Mary, but we're supposed to technically go to church the next day, I think. And Jerry Heinemann is.
Yeah.
You don't get to pick where those indulgences go.
Well, okay. So here's the thing. Well, yeah. Well, yes, you do in a way. So let's look at that, right? So when we talk about indulgences, what indulgences are, and this got people in a lot of trouble back in the Middle Ages. This is what it is. It's a remittance, either partially or fully, of your temporal punishment due to sin, right? So in other words, if I were to die with a plenary indulgence, meaning a full indulgence, right? I'm going right to heaven. Now, the key about that is very tricky because there's criteria for a plenary indulgence. The first thing is you would do the requirement that brings about the plenary indulgence. So, for instance, here in St. Louis, if you went through the Jubilee door once, right, when John Paul II closed the door for the year, right? If you walked through that door for the first time after that closing, and then you received communion that day, went to Mass, you received sacramental absolution and don't have no mortal sin in your soul for the last 3 weeks within that time frame. If you pray for the intentions of the Pope, and then the tricky one is you have no attachment to any temporal things.
That's the hard one.
That's the tricky one, right? Because, okay, what does that mean? Well, I have no real desire for ice cream. I have no real desire for even the food I eat. It's necessary, but if I had it, great. If not, I'm pretty indifferent to it.
The desire itself is the issue, right?
Yes.
Because if I'm like, oh, I'm not going to eat ice cream.
Yeah.
But like,
because you can eat ice cream. There's nothing wrong with eating ice cream.
But I think about robbing a bank.
Mm-hmm.
That's a sin.
Right. That would also be an indication that you're not free of any temporal things, right? So that's kind of the tricky wicket, right? Because, well, am I really, am I not? Well, God knows. You may know, but no one else necessarily would. Now, here's the other thing about when it comes to plenary indulgences. Okay, yeah, I can do them for myself, but the problem with that is as soon as I sin or do something else, I lose it, right? Maybe better to do it for someone who's already in purgatory, right? Because that also counts as merit towards you too. And so it would probably be better to actually do plenary or any indulgence really for those that need it in purgatory, because we may just squander it here on earth. But the thing there is you have to have the intention of doing that. So I'm going to do this stuff for Grandma. I'm going to do all this stuff for Uncle Bob, right? That's where the intention goes. So you could direct it towards an individual, sure.
But I know for a fact that Jerry, that's his entire goal every day
Mhm.
is to get that plenary.
Yeah, and that's
he
good.
actually does it. He shows
That's a
up and-
great goal. Yeah.
So, but then, does he have to consciously pick where it's going,
Mhm.
or okay?
Yeah, you'd have to.
He can't
What
say
happens?
for the next
You
person.
could, you could do that too, Marilyn. Say for the soul that needs it the most, maybe.
Okay,
Right.
I was gonna say because like, how the hell do I know? I'm fairly confident my dad's in heaven.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But nothing against my mother.
Yeah.
But but she wasn't raised Catholic. She
Sure.
became Catholic.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, I probably gonna get struck out because she was pretty good too.
Yeah.
But I'm fairly confident. You know what I mean? How do I get a plenary indulgence for my mom?
Yeah.
How do I know she's already there?
That's a good point. Well, so here's the thing: God does not squander it in some
Okay.
way, right?
So
So
he
if
could-
anything, He would default to whoever
Whoever he-
trusts, whoever needs
right,
it,
right.
So yeah, even if He did it for no intention whatsoever, God would use that for some good.
I hope all this is
We would
successful.
No matter
No,
what.
but
it's
no matter
not-
what. But here's kind of the tricky
I mean,
thing about it:
what else?
you don't really necessarily know for sure if you get one or not.
Right,
You really don't.
right.
You're doing it in good faith, of course, and you're trusting in God's providence and mercy and love. And that's really all it is. That's all it really can do, right? Because in reality, especially in society today, there's a lot of these things that are really earthly goods that we do have some dependence on. They were not necessarily indifferent to.
So it's not an automatic cause and effect.
Not necessarily.
Ever.
Not really. I mean, so there may be, right? But a lot of it comes down to the intention of the person that's doing it at the time. What they're, if they truly are not dependent on anything in this world. And even sometimes we don't necessarily know if that's the case or not, right?
But I depend on my call. Like, there's just certain things I don't have it. I depend, and my wife depends on me, and I depend on her. Is that like, while you're working through this and trying to get that plenary indulgence, there's nothing that.
Well, see that.
Am I
that's,
misunderstanding
no.
the
I mean
terms?
that's a good point because here's the thing, right? When we talk about earthly dependence, that could also be people too. I rely on my relationship. I'm willing to actually have someone take my wife or have my children. You know, if God takes my children, how would I react to that? Is that okay?
Well, like even like,
Right.
so say I go to Rosary on Thursday night, and we do all the extra stuff, and I make a conscious effort to go do all the steps to get it done.
Yeah.
And then I go to work on Friday after I go to Mass, and I had 4 jobs planned out, and I had these 5 guys lined out to go to it. So I'm depending on them.
Yeah.
Do I screw it all up if one of them doesn't show up to work and I'm like, I was depending on
I
it?
think you have to understand it has to be more of a conscious dependence,
Okay.
right? So I mean, it's really like one of these things. Like if you're thinking about that while you're doing going through the actual steps.
But if I'm dependent on cigarettes or something,
Yeah, I mean that's probably worse, right? Yeah, because one I mean, reasonably speaking, one has to do with your livelihood and like actually the way you provide as your vocation,
Right.
and the other one is something that really you don't need.
Well, part of like the conscious, I'm sorry if I'm micromanaging. I never, until I went on an Acts retreat, if they taught me about an examination of conscience before then, I don't remember it. But like, one of it is if you're BSing at work, that's a sin.
Yeah, you mean like taking
Like
time
if you're
out
taking
of
advantage,
right,
like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, that's one thing probably a lot of people don't really think about. Like, just like if you're at work and you're just like wasting time at work.
Right.
Well, I mean, you're kind of stealing time that's really supposed to be designed for a purpose. That could be a violation of the 7th commandment. Thou shalt not steal.
But then if you work, like, I work a lot. And like, so then I start asking myself, am I working a lot because I really don't want to go deal with all the other stuff? Then I'm like,
That's a fair question.
but then when I don't work, guess what? I'm just sitting at home.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I mean, the question is, what are you doing at home? I mean, I
Well,
would
like,
imagine.
so Katie's running the kids around right now.
Yeah.
And I'm here.
Yeah.
And I just left a job.
Right.
And like, so the way I understand examination of conscience,
Mm-hmm.
because I went and did this little job right now, and then I came here, I'm probably sinning. It's somewhere in that track, in my own mind.
I would see that, and
Because
that's,
I'm
that's
neglecting my
see,
family.
and that's the
my
struggle
point.
when it comes to sin, because sin is always subjective,
Right.
right? For you, maybe, but maybe not. I don't know. I mean, that's really that's a matter of conscience.
Well, I didn't have to go out to Mrs. Jacobsmeyer's house. I chose to go out there.
Okay.
And but I'm good at like balancing athletics and.
Oh yeah, great.
But I don't necessarily. But there's times when I'm just like, no, I gotta go to soccer.
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean,
damn
yeah.
good and well I can, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I think it's a struggle for everybody at certain times. Like, how am I using my free time? Am I properly using leisure properly, right?
Right.
What's leisure for me, and am I actually doing that right? Because, when we talk about leisure, leisure is not necessarily just vegging out or taking a nap. Maybe it is. Or watching Netflix or whatever. Maybe it is. Leisure time, properly speaking, is an action that actually rejuvenates you.
Well, yeah, so working rejuvenates me.
Good. Then that's now the question is too much leisure time becoming an issue?
Right.
And so it's about really.
But I think when it starts taking away from something else, it's probably.
Well, it's a question of balance of life, right? That's what it all comes down to. So if let's say I'm working. Now working is to provide for my family as a husband and father, or wife and mother. But maybe I'm doing that too much and neglecting my actual interactions with my children and wife, or husband and children. Yeah, those are good questions to ask. And your conscience will tell you if that's the case or not. But maybe for some people, it may be, I have to provide for their school, and I have to provide for their college, and I'm working to that end so they don't have to worry about that stuff. That's a good thing to do. Nothing wrong with that. But if you feel that your conscience is telling you, I need to spend a little more time with my kids, well, okay, then do that. That's the whole purpose of the conscience, right? That's what tells us what's right and wrong. I can't do that. I can tell you what's moral and immoral, but I can't tell you what's a sin. That's something I cannot do. At least I can't tell you if it's sin for you. I can say if it's a sin for me. That's it. That's why it's always kind of tricky when we talk about morality and sinfulness, because sinfulness is always subjective. It's always up to the individual making those calls. Morality is more objective, right? There's actually I see someone rob a bank. I can say that's a bad action. That's not good for someone to rob a bank, right? I can't say if that person doing it is a robber, though. Because only that person can tell me if they're a robber. I don't know. I can maybe say, hey, you know what? You probably shouldn't do that. Because you're taking something that doesn't belong to you. That's not a good thing to do. But it's up to that individual's conscience to make that decision if it actually is wrong for them. It's sin for them. And that's kind of where the distinction lies.
But what about there's other forms of stealing?
Sure.
So we all look at, in our society, we look at robbing a bank.
Right.
Bad, but all this crazy stuff that's going on around here.
Right. Well,
now, I think that's just as sinful. It's like stealing trust, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's ways of
Or
looking
the
at
way
it.
people if someone had an issue with you and they want to go out and just defame your character, that's a form of violation. And I think that's just equal to robbing a bank.
Actually, we would say that was actually a violation of the Fifth Commandment, assassination of character.
Right.
Calumny.
Calumny.
Right. So yeah, it's wrong. Now, but the question would be, would that person know it's wrong and do it anyway, or do they even know it's wrong at all?
There's a lot of. That's what I was just thinking earlier. I was just there's some people I work with that they don't know they're not supposed to screw around at work. They don't consciously. It's not even part of their agenda.
Right, and maybe that could be just a part of uninformed conscience. I don't know, or maybe that could just be a fact that they're neglecting it. If they actually know better than doing it, well, we would say that's a mortal sin, right? And that's where those distinctions lie. So it's not just like a case of, well, I know robbing a bank is bad, I shouldn't do it. That's a mortal sin. Well, no, it could be really anything. I know that telling even this white lie is wrong because I'm actually not telling the person the truth. But I'm going to do it anyway because I want to hurt their feelings. Well, that could be mortal sin. Because you know it's wrong to tell that person a lie, yet you're doing it. Regardless of the reasoning. When in reality, when you're truthful with somebody, even with white lies, it actually strengthens your relationship deeper. And you're telling that person you can actually trust me with the truth.
I thought part of the difference between mortal sin and venial sin was the gravity of it. That's not true?
Part of that is part of it, but really what the criteria for mortal sin would be, is it bad? Do I know it's bad? And do I do it anyway?
So how bad it is has nothing to do with
Not really, because bad is bad, right?
it. Well, a white lie isn't the same as a terrible lie.
Sure. But here's the question. That's why I'm saying this is more subjective, right? Because maybe if I didn't know that telling a white lie is not bad, well, okay, then is that really a mortal sin for me? I didn't know. Maybe I don't even see the reason why it would be bad. Okay, well, maybe for you that might be the case.
I wouldn't think a white lie would be a mortal sin for anybody. If I tell you you look great, and everybody sees you don't look great, but I don't want you to feel bad.
So here's the problem with that, though, right? Isn't that an act against charity?
No, I was trying to be charitable.
No, what you're trying to do is you're trying to be
Charitable.
falsely nice.
Well, you might be trying to be charitable, but I know a lot of people in my world that they will never tell you anything negative if their life depended on it. And I know very well that whatever they have said, I cannot.
Yeah.
And the four of you'd be sitting in a room going, "Why are you mad, Jamie?" Because I know he's sitting there lying at me.
Yeah.
And he's just
Right.
and it's.
Yeah, and part of that could be because maybe some people actually have this too. Is like they think that saying something negative is evil. That's not true.
Right. I'd rather know where you stand.
Right. Saying something negative, as long as it's true, there's nothing wrong with saying something negative. And as long as it's in line with charity, you don't want to assassinate, but you want a person to actually understand the truth. That's an act of charity. I want you to conform with reality. That's best for you. You look ridiculous in those rainbow trousers. I'm sorry, that you do. That's an act of charity, so that person doesn't actually embarrass themselves when they go out and actually people say the same thing about that person. But I understand what you're saying, that because a lot of these times white lies are really more focused on feelings, right? I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want them to feel bad.
I don't want them to be embarrassed.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. So there's ways of doing that well. Like, so obviously, if I would say that in front of a crowd of people, that would be wrong on me too, right? But if I pull that person aside and say, you know what, I think you made a mistake wearing those pants or those shoes or whatever. They kind of look ridiculous, and maybe why don't you go back and change them, and we can come back in later. That's not good charity. Right? So we're talking about morality. Now, when we're talking about morality, there's another thing that kind of associated with those too. So the matter needs to be either good or bad, right? The intention has to be either good or bad, and the circumstances have to be either good or bad. So if we're talking about like white lies, right? The action itself is telling the truth, which is good. My intention is maybe to help save them from embarrassment, which is good. But if I'm saying that in front of a crowd of people to that person out loud, rather than pulling them aside and maybe telling that, well, that wouldn't be good. Which means the entire action will be immoral. Only one of those aspects needs to be bad for it to be immoral. All three need to be good for it to actually be a moral action. But again, sin is always going to be subjective. Right? So that's up to the individual conscience, and which is why we should form our consciences well, so we can actually differentiate these things and know the difference whether I'm actually saying a white lie or a huge lie, or what the circumstance may be, or I should maybe pull this person aside or not. That's what it comes down to.
So if we're out in public and they say, they're going back and forth and say, well, what do you think of it when I got on? What would you do?
So there's nothing saying you can't be silent.
Because they're asking.
Yeah, there's nothing saying you can't be silent.
Yeah.
I'd rather not give my opinion in this. Or I'd rather not get involved with this discussion. Nothing wrong with that.
That says something too.
Was that?
That says something
Yes,
too.
yeah, right. Right. Yeah, because how important is the discussion, really? I mean, Yeah, in the long run, who really cares who wears what outside to whatever? Or how really people look? But it always is an act of charity. It's always an act of charity and fortitude to tell the truth. Always. But the circumstances do matter in that too.
But if you like truly like hurt someone's feelings, like if one of the kids here said like, "Oh, you don't look good in that dress," and it like just destroy that girl's self-esteem, that's just as bad, right?
Well, I see. I don't know. I mean, I think there's ways of providing it in good ways and bad ways, right? So tone really does matter in those situations, right? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, but part of that goes to intention. Is my intention actually help this person and love them,
Right. No.
or just make them feel bad about themselves?
Right. You're right.
Right.
You're right. Intention.
So we have to always look at those things too when it comes to morality and sinfulness. Yeah, there's ways to tell the truth in love. I mean, the classic one is, if someone's wife or husband, I guess for that matter, comes down and asks if they look fat in certain things, right? What would the spouse say?
Right.
Right? I mean, again, I'm not married, but I might say something like, well, I don't really care what you look like. I love you no matter what.
Which she would take as.
Yeah, right, exactly, right? So, again, and part of this also is a receiver, too.
Yeah.
So, if you're going to ask that question,
Right.
you should be open to an answer.
Right.
I think there's something to be said about that,
There's
too.
no right answer.
Right. Yeah, because like that's the other question. That's the other thing you bring up too. Is like, well, what's your intention there? Are you trying to trap me, or are you actually want the truth? I think it's a fair question. That's a very trapping question in some ways. Which maybe can kind of give some indication what you're thinking. I don't know, but still, yeah. Good. Questions, comments, concerns, heresies.
But intention is almost everything. No matter what.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you could have good intention. I mean, in the same way too. Like that's where you get the understanding: do the ends justify the means?
Right, but it's like the same thing. Like I don't think I've ever murdered anybody in war, but I don't have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, "What do you mean you don't have a choice?" But at some point, do I need to confess that?
Well, okay. So we have to understand when it comes to things like war or even like police action.
Right.
A lot of this comes down to like self-defense.
But what about if, I guess, being part of the mafia, you consciously knowing you're in something bad.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You don't really have a choice if you get told what to do.
Okay, so here's the thing: when we talk about mortal sin, it has to be an act of intellect and the will,
That's not
right?
a good example. I
Yeah.
apologize.
So no, but that's the thing. What you're leading into is if you're compelled, meaning if I don't do this action, something bad will happen to someone else that I love or my family.
Well, that's how the gangs now they do
Right.
it. The kid completely
Right.
has no involvement in the
Yeah.
gang, but if they don't, they'll jump him in, and if he doesn't do something, they're going to go out there.
So that might be a good example of what the difference between mortal and venial sin when it comes to murder,
Right.
because compulsion does actually compulsion is actually not an act of your will, right? So in reality, your culpability is highly reduced because of that, to the point where it may not be mortal, right? So again, when we're talking mortality, it has to be, I know this is wrong to do, and I have the choice to do it, I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Not, well, I'm going to put a gun to your head, and you're going to have to kill this person, or I'm going
Right.
to kill you. Well,
That's true.
okay, well, shoot, that's not a sin on me, right? I'm being compelled to do this. But that's why war is a little different, because war, again, this comes down to what am I doing in the action? Am I actually trying to take life, or am I trying to save it?
Right.
Right. Typically, we would say that's anyone in war, or even someone who, let's say, if a robber came to their house at night and they were defending their family and they shot somebody.
But then there's that, but it's just like if I didn't have to shoot him,
Yeah.
I consciously did it because I was angry.
Mhm.
Like in war, I have rules of engagement.
Yeah,
I
sure.
consciously violate the rules of
Right,
engagement.
right.
And that's what some of the questions with some of the police actions are.
Yeah, of course. And that's what I'm saying. Even those actions have to be relegated to the intention and the circumstances. So, in other words, was that the intention of that police officer to actually take the life because they were angry or driven by emotion or racism or whatever else? Or were they actually trying to defend their own lives or the lives of somebody else from someone who couldn't be controlled properly. Those are the same action. You look at the same side of the coin, right? And that's why intention does matter in those circumstances, whether it's sinful or not.
It goes back to like if someone's in dire need and they rob something to survive for their family or something.
Still wrong.
Like a Robin Hood.
Yeah, still wrong, but definitely I wouldn't say it would be mortal, for sure. I mean, again, the other option, in those circumstances, the other thing you have to look at is what are the alternatives, right? Was there better options to do? And the sin may not necessarily be in the act itself, but the fact you knew there were other options, you didn't do those things, right? So yeah. In today's society, when it comes to certain things like robbery or whatever else, there's so many outlets available to actually provide for the needs of people that the classic scenario would be you have a father of 5 who lost his job and couldn't find any other work, and their family's starved, they live on the streets, and he goes into Deerbergs or Schnucks and he looks for a job, they won't hire him, and let's say a loaf of bread falls off the rack and lays there, and so he takes the loaf of bread, brings it to his family to feed them. Is it moral or immoral? And then you maybe you compare that to, let's say, instead of Schnucks or Deerbergs, it's I don't know, LeGrand's, a mom and pop store, closing it, right? So that loaf of bread falls on the floor, the person walks out with the loaf of bread and feeds the family. Those circumstances do matter, right? Because it would be a worse scenario if they took it from a mom and pop shop who would actually, part of their livelihood's taken away in a really meaningful way by that loaf of bread, compared to a larger chain of Deerbergs and Schnucks. We would say regardless it would be wrong. Regardless it would be wrong. But the culpability is highly reduced because of the circumstance that person was in and the intention that person had. The intention is, of course, to feed his family so they would live. Okay? But the circumstances were not good. Now, sin, well, that's up to the person doing the action. Can't say that for sure. Right? But the other situation we have to look at is what other alternatives? Where did you go to, like Vincent Nepal? Did you utilize a lot of the food pantries we have in this city? Or were you just kind of prideful that you didn't want to go to those places? That also would be a problem. Right? But practically speaking, I don't think there's a circumstance today, at least here in the United States, where someone would be justified in going and stealing a loaf of bread from even a big store. Because there are alternatives to that. Now you could say, well, maybe the person didn't know. Okay. Well, that may be the case. But that might be the only circumstance you'd say that'd be okay. Make sense? You learn something new tonight, Joyce? Good.
And Jamie Purcell is really as crazy as she always thought.
Good. Any other questions, comments?
So, like last week, there was a lot of eye-opening stuff last week, and I'm learning a lot because I'm paying attention a lot more. Is that?
Good.
But we weren't taught this growing up.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's always a big debate from talk about catechesis from last 50 years.
But it seems like my kids are being taught this now.
Good. Good. Yeah.
I was
maybe it's been rectified then. That's good news. That's good to hear. Because I understand. But here's the other thing though too, Jamie. I mean, I always kind of weigh this whole thing with my grade school years are so far.
A long time ago, right?
Right. So, I mean, I can't even remember if maybe they were.
The only religion I remember in grade school is preparing for confirmation.
Okay.
And sitting there with our 8th grade teacher reciting things and obviously I learned when I was real little, I learned all the prayers. But from first communion to 8th grade, I couldn't tell you what we did in religion class.
Yeah, I think that the biggest challenge has been, I think we've seen the fruit of that now, is just the understanding of the real presence. I think to that point, I don't know if I was ever told in my high school or grade school years that the Eucharist is actually the real presence of Jesus Christ.
I know I wasn't told. That's like,
Yeah.
was like news to me when
It wasn't until I was actually challenged on it. I was like, oh, well, maybe that's good. Now, I've heard that's the case with a lot of people too. And
well, that's
so,
like when one of the girls said, you said something about talking the other day in church to a group of people, and I said, and she didn't understand why. At the end, if there was, the one kid thought you were talking to the adults, and I said, well, the presence of God.
I was.
The Eucharist was there.
yeah, it
and,
was. Yeah.
And the Eucharist was there, and I explained, and Gabriella sort of got it, but Samantha was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, once it's blessed,
right.
And she goes, well, I noticed the light's not always on. I go, well, it's not there. And I go, but what do you think? There's a cross there.
Yeah. Right.
Joseph and Mary. You really think you should be jumping around?
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, they were particularly
But
long
I think
that
a
day
lot of
too.
people don't understand that.
And I usually don't say that, but that day they were particular. There was 2 days. They were very particular as they were leaving mass. It was after 8:00 mass. And I just commented on it. I said, "Can you please, as you leave, can you please keep some respectful silence?"
But if you ran out the church and polled them, do they know?
Yeah.
Do they know? Besides, we're in a church, but is the main reason because of the presence of the Eucharist?
Well, as far as would they know that actually that's why?
I would argue most of them wouldn't have a clue about that.
So,
but is that why we should not be talking in church and talking?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I think there's a line there in some ways. So, like for instance, well, first off, Pew Research has kind of shown that even people that go to mass on a regular basis, only 25% of those people actually realize what the true presence is.
Right.
Now, I don't. Now you could say, well, maybe that's a little skewed. Where they doing the polling? Who was? I don't know.
I'd argue. I don't know if it's 25. I think it's low.
Maybe a little bit higher.
But I bet you if you polled the majority of the parents here and you asked them.
Yeah. Well, again, that was also.
And they had to answer on the spot. Like if they couldn't go back and think about it.
Right.
I'd bet you over 50% of the people here do not know what that lamp means.
And to be fair, there was also for people that regularly go to mass, like on a weekly basis. Now, yeah, I mean, we're also seeing that that's not the case. Not every family in the school goes to mass on a weekly basis, unfortunately. So yeah, you're right. Maybe it might be a little higher for people who don't go to mass. Of course, we would imagine that'd be the case. But yeah, the reason that we have respect is because Jesus is present there. Now, again, there's levels. I mean, part of that is understanding that we don't necessarily have an area here at St. Gabriel to socialize after masses. So I think there can be some middle ground as far as like maybe it may be appropriate to have small, quiet conversation with people in the pews. I don't necessarily think that's to be an issue, as long as they're respectful and recognizing, yeah, look, we have Jesus here. Let's not start, gossiping or doing things else like that, right? But also the balance that with like there were people that were shouting after that mass.
Why were they doing that?
Well, I think the parents were trying to get the attention of their children, and there was sort of like the children get excited, and so it's like, okay, but this is a church. This isn't a social hall. Now, I don't know if we can put a policy in place maybe after mass and go to the cafeteria or something. I don't know. But part of
this Psalm 45 minutes earlier.
And see,
I
that's
do think
the thing.
that's a little ridiculous.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Like, we like them to know, especially when I'm there. She'll always go.
Yeah.
But if I'm there, it's a rarity. But I'll wave to her.
Yeah,
and I'm
sure.
just like,
yeah.
But I'm like, you're there every week.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. I mean, and it just trying to struck me at least those particular mass. Usually it's not that bad. Usually it's kind of pretty. But those two masses last week particularly, it was a little overboard. Yeah. And so I felt I should have said something, and I did. Now I know people might get ticked off about that. I don't know.
Well, the kids noticed it, so you must have did something right.
Well, good. But yeah, I wasn't necessarily talking to the kids. I was talking to the parents.
No, I don't. Whoever told me knew that you weren't talking to the kids.
Right. So it was, but I think that's understanding. There's a fine line between reverential silence and this understanding of community. I think there's a balance there, and like I said, because we don't necessarily have a space you can go to after mass to kind of socialize, I can see like on the nave, like respectful silence to have a conversation. Sure, I'm not necessarily okay with. I'm not necessarily against that, but it has to be respectful because of where we are and who's there.
Especially when you can just walk out to the vestibule and,
Yeah.
and have your sidebar conversation there.
Yeah. Yeah, there may be alternatives. I mean, that was part of the, of course, part of the capital campaign we were going to do was kind of do an extension up in the vestibule to kind of have that space, which would have been great. But of course, that's on hiatus right now. So maybe we'll get that. We'll get there eventually. Maybe not be the case. So then, but with that would come even more responsibility. So then it would be kind of like, well, you don't have an excuse to stay in the nave to actually converse. You have a space to go do that, right? So let's keep this area for people who actually want to pray in front of the Blessed Sacrament and have a conversation with Jesus. I think in reality that's kind of the best way. That's really the best use of that space. And I mean I know because like coming from Immaculate Heart, there was a gym there. And usually the gym was open after Mass, so people would go there. But even then, people would still kind of stick around, and it was kind of odd, have conversations like, I do have to say it was kind of frustrating because, even though maybe our family didn't stick around after Mass and pray, people did. And so you kind of want to give them that space and that respect to let them do that. That's what the purpose of the church is. So yeah, I think there is a balance, but I think it depends on the circumstances again. Like, okay, well, is there some place available to have a social time? If there is, then I don't think you have an excuse. But if there's not, well, okay, well, let's at least keep it reverential and somewhat, respectful.
So did you notice the kids after 9 o'clock Mass Sunday?
Well, yeah, usually I'm outside, so I don't really see.
Because those were my grands.
Oh, yeah?
Well, I usually go around with the boys. Afterwards we'll go to, we'll say our prayers and stuff like that. And there's certain things that we do, even throughout, because one of the things that I've done ever since the beginning of time is, for one, to keep them reined in during Mass. Okay, you gotta watch, the miracle's coming soon. The miracle's coming. Watch Father, so we'll go through the whole.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Do you see Jesus? Yeah. And it's really funny because my 2.5-year-old grandson, the one day we were sitting there and all of a sudden he walks over to somebody else in the pew. He goes, "Do you see it? Do you see it?" It was like, oh my God.
Well, that was kind of, that's nice. That's good, yeah, right.
But on Sunday, we're going around and the 2.5-year-old, I could not catch him. And it was like, okay, if I keep chasing him, he thinks it's a game. But I was like, okay, I can get him. I'm like, Micah, go get your brother. Get him, bring him back.
Yeah.
But it was so hard. And nobody else was praying at that point. But, at the same token, I'm like, I don't know what was going on Sunday, but I just could not rein him in for nothing.
Usually, especially, usually have the Sunday Mass, usually we're on the outside, so we didn't kind of, by the time it clears out, by the time we come back in, usually it's all clear, so I don't know, but some people kind of stick around.
He went over by, the baptismal fountain, he's gone, is there water in there? Is there water?
Yeah, there always is.
So they're curious, and so they're asking stuff about church, so I don't try, it's like that. It's like, where do you find the boundary? It's like, I want them to be inquisitive.
Right.
I want them to ask. I want them to, know as much as they have answers. I can give them answers for, but you do it quieter. Can you not?
Yeah. Well, and at 2, I mean, obviously that's going to be difficult for any 2-year-old. But the fact they're asking questions, I think it's a great, good. So I mean, but like I said, there's always that balance, I think, in some ways. I mean, and some people, even like bringing back the children's liturgy, I think that's kind of like, in ways that's good, but I mean, in some ways it's kind of like, well, there's nothing wrong with having the kids there for the liturgy of the word.
Right.
And, you can say, well, we're getting fussy. Well, we're professionals. We don't necessarily, tell you the truth, I don't usually notice if the kid's acting up or screaming in the church or whatever during the Mass. Some people may complain they can't hear certain things. Okay. It's understandable, I guess, too, but personally, I'd rather have the kids there than not. That's just Father Mark. I mean, that's just how I kind of operate. It's actually a good sign for the church that our youth are actually there. So I'm okay with that. Yeah. Even though we have a choir room and stuff,
I don't
fine.
take them in the prayer room, because that's
Yeah.
just total playtime.
Yeah,
So-
and that's what I'm saying. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's because I was raised without a cry room. Part of that was we were, discipline I think is a little different today than it was back then too. So it was expected when we went to mass. I mean, I can remember from the age of about 5 on, it was expected, hey, this is time for being with Jesus, and you gotta be quiet. Okay. And there were real consequences if I weren't. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting thing. The only time I really had an experience with a cry room, well, I didn't have experience, but I was in Charleston, South Carolina, and I was attending a mass Sunday morning, and the priest stopped the liturgy, and there was a family. They were a relatively young family, had a little baby, and the baby was fussy, and the priest stopped the liturgy and asked if they'd go to the cry room.
Oh.
Now, here's the thing. That particular priest, he was diagnosed with brain cancer. He was going through a lot of turmoil. And so, in those circumstances, sure, I get it. But I don't know if I were that family, if I would have come back to that church after that. So, yeah, it's difficult. My approach is keep the kids there. I'm good with that. I'm right with that. But, yeah.
But
There's also
sometimes
things-
it's like, and I didn't learn this at first either. If you keep telling them shh,
Yeah.
it's just as distracting.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
I'm just like, stop engaging. But my one used to be really bad, and I'm just like, it's time to go.
Mm.
But it just really depends on what they're doing.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Because they'll start tussling with each other, and then it's a bigger scene. And
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I kind of see it both ways. I mean,
I had someone one time go, "Don't worry about it." They're just behind me, and I'm like,
Well, the other thing too is like, particular mass you go to, if you're going to the 9 o'clock mass, you should expect there are going to be families there, there are going to be children there. I mean, come on, you should know, you should really know better in that respect. Yeah, I don't know, maybe some of the mass, maybe like the 5:30 at night or the 5 o'clock on Saturday. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that should be maybe that's a little different. I don't know. But there's kind of a different feel in each of those masses. Different congregations, each one of those masses too. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting to see how that dynamic works too. But, yeah, good. Great. All right. Well, it's almost 7:30. I don't know. Unless anyone else they want to bring up, discuss.
One thing I was thinking about was that there's so many topics that we talk about I've never even heard of, and it's like way over. It's like, okay, I have no idea what they're talking about. I completely lost me even from the beginning. I don't know, and I wonder. I can't be the only one, but I'm sure that if I hadn't been coming, I probably wouldn't if I was listening to those and I think, oh, well, that's way above me. I can't, and so I just wouldn't even want to do it because it's just, I feel like, well, that's for people that really know their stuff. That's not for
The whole intention here, though, is really kind of answer all those questions. So I think no matter what, we're gonna have people at different levels of their understanding of the faith, and that's good. So I encourage anyone, if you have a question, what do you clarify? Ask that question. Like, what do you mean by that? I'm okay. I think that's good because I think you're right, Mary. I think most people would have the same kind of questions, right? Here, really the thing about it is most people are not at a level of high catechesis in their understanding. Most people just aren't. I think most people, they probably, when they graduate high school or grade school, that's about the level they stay at.
And depend upon what they were taught.
Yep. Right.
Or not taught.
Right. So yeah, if I'm singing over your head or I'm using terms you may not understand, please ask the question. I am not going to jump on your foot at all.
Everybody else knew, and I was like, okay.
Well, or they say we're acting that way. That's if they're acting. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so. Yeah.
like, I don't even know what to
Well, can you maybe give me an example, like maybe?
No, because I was just, even the terminologies that you were talking about, I was like, I don't even know what we're talking about.
Oh, okay.
You know, it was just, I was completely lost.
Oh yeah, well, I'm sorry about
There was
that.
like 3 weeks in a row, and I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh.
I feel like I'm so lost, like I want to learn, and then I'm like, okay, I'm not getting this. Why am I not getting this?
Well, I know I apologize if that's. I mean, but yeah, I encourage you if you have this in the future, ask the question. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's no
I
problem.
didn't want to hold up everybody else who seemed to know what was going on.
Well, here's the thing. What I find, because I've done this in the past, and I do this sometimes too.
Yeah.
I just keep on nodding because I don't want to look like the one that doesn't know. And so I think we all do that at some point, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, you know, the transubstantiation. Oh yeah. Yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, no, I there's nothing wrong with asking a question, and that's why I try to like kind of look at you guys and get some feedback to see where you are. And if you guys are like giving blank stares, you're like okay, then I should probably readjust how I'm approaching you. Right?
I find that people like Ron and Lee Hanel who converted know a hell of a lot more.
Well, and also Ron and Lee, they're also part of the RCA program.
Right. They also,
right.
But like, that's why there needs to be more of this, and that's. I said something to him a long time ago. And it's not that we just don't learn it.
Yeah.
There's nothing, and even if we're supposed to know it, don't feel bad about it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, because here's the thing. I mean, the fact that you guys are coming to this and doing this, you're light years ahead of any other, anyone else probably. Because like I said, I think we tend to.
It's not that I want to be ahead of somebody.
No.
I want everybody to know it. It's like, how do we get it out there?
No, but Mary, the point I'm trying to make though is that's you can't love what you don't know.
Oh.
And so the fact that you guys are trying to get to know, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And so, don't be discouraged or don't feel afraid to ask a clarifying question or be like, what do you mean by that term? What does this mean? Because here's the thing, I don't know where everyone's at either. So, yeah, whatever you need, that's what these are for.
I'm at 2nd grade level.
Good, great. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I think most of us are probably just like, hey, we got the confirmation, that's all we did. That's it, done.
Yeah.
That's all I need to know. Well, there's a whole lot more after that.
And I don't remember anything from high school either. I don't remember one thing.
All I remember is my one religion teacher saying something about pro-life and upsetting like half the girls in the class, and 2 of them walked out. And that's the only thing I can tell you. But I can tell you who my 2 religion teachers, 3 religion teachers were at the Bird.
Mm-hmm.
One was Father Cook, and then for 2 years I had Mr. Regan, but I don't remember what he taught us.
Yeah.
And the other one was Mrs. Liebrecht, and that's my only profound memory of religion at the Bird.
Well, and that's, I don't know, and maybe this, I know my experience in high school, I think this is probably true today. A lot of times in the high schools, they're really kind of more practical applications. They talk more about the social teachings of the church. That's when you start doing like your service hours and that kind of thing. But the problem I think is a lot of times they assume you have the building blocks of the faith already. And I think the experience is that most people don't.
No.
I think that's why I think our kids are getting more here now.
Yeah.
Because I think that assumption has been done. Like there's been this big assumption that everybody was picking up on. Like the principal just left the Bird. Our motto wasn't faith in Christ until like 8 years ago, or 12 years ago. And it's.
Do we have a motto? Well, I don't know.
No,
Light years
that's
away
my
from
point.
you.
But like Bridget, I think the Bird got more Catholic under Bridget.
Oh, good. Well, good.
And we only had 1 priest in the building with her around. There was like 5 or 6 priests and like 4 nuns when I was there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we talked about this last week too. I mean, it's no, I don't know if it's a coincidence or I don't know what the reason is, but this is the first time in history of the Catholic school system of St. Louis that we've had more non-Catholics in the Catholic secondary school system than Catholics. And that's interesting too. I think that actually kind of also invites some interesting approaches because what I would hope doesn't happen is there's a fear of teaching the Catholic faith not to offend those who are non-Catholic. But I think the the antidote to that is, well, these people are sending their children to Catholic school, they should expect to learn the Catholic faith.
So there's a conversation like that about, on the same topic, but at Lutheran North. And there was people concerned that, because Lutheran North is getting pretty heavy minority, and the minority parents that have been sending their kids there and that have a history of being at Lutheran North said, we do not want this to be known as a minority school, we want this to always be known as a Lutheran school.
You mean like minorities and non...
Yeah, the non-minorities that are not Lutheran,
right,
that are there, they do not want them that mindset to over, that exact subject came up, where this is a Lutheran school, you will learn the Lutheran faith while you're in this school.
Yeah.
Well, we had that with one of our neighbors there from Iraq. And they wanted to send their kids, actually they wanted to come to Gabe's turned away. But they went to Joan of Arc, and one of the things they said was...
You mean South City Catholic Head?
Yeah. Well, at that time it was Joan of Arc.
Oh, okay, all right, okay.
But Joan of Arc told them, that, okay, this is a Catholic school, and they said, okay. And their kids, they took religion classes, they did all the, they didn't do the sacraments, but they did all the requirements and did everything that they were supposed to do, that all the other kids, I should say, that all the other kids did, other than receive the sacraments. And they were fine with that, but that was because they wanted that good education.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of these too, I think, are missed opportunities. I mean, when you think about that, what these earlier opportunities are evangelization, actually even conversion. And not that you should be forced or proselytized. No one's saying that should happen, but you would hope that if you're teaching the truth, that should appeal in some way, right? When I say, oh, by the way, there's this person named Jesus Christ who was God and became one of us and actually died for you. What could you say to that? Obviously maybe more information, how that worked, right? But I mean, once you kind of learn this truth, it's interesting that, how can you not convert in that respect? It's often said that
isn't that what wasn't Scott Hahn researching?
Yeah.
To fight the Catholic Church? And
right. Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting how often that happens, where people are we're trying to refute the Catholic Church, and it's they end up being converted. Because they realize, oh, wait a minute, this actually is true. Oh, okay, well then, because once you understand that it's true, then it's what else am I going to do? You can either lie to yourself for the rest of your life, or it's well, I gotta do this. And so, I think we have a lot of fertile ground to work with. But I think it's, that's the thing. The big question from either whether it be grade school or secondary schools is, well, how many people are converting out of these places? And if they're not, why not?
But it goes back to what you said last week. No one's asking.
Yeah.
There's no way in hell.
Yeah.
I was actually shocked when you said there was teachers, people on staff that weren't Catholic last week. I know there's people that are Catholic that are not practicing. I know there's fathers that are. I know one. I was actually sort of impressed. There's one father. He comes to everything, and he still says he's openly Lutheran. And then there's, but then there's other people well, I'm not Catholic. But if you talk to them, they almost think they're not welcome.
Yeah, it's an interesting scenario. Yeah, I've heard that a lot. And that's the thing. One of the big knocks against this parish.
I'm never gonna know.
Well, one of the big things about this parish that people were kind of talking, and this came from surveys and everything else, that apparently we have a reputation of not being welcoming here. I don't know. I really don't
think it's
see
a conscious effort, because we talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
Everybody's wondering why I moved.
Yeah.
And there is a little there's a little goofiness with. As the kids go through the school, there's people that get all these cliques.
Yeah.
And all the Acts guys say, well, as soon as my kid left Gabe's, I didn't know what to do. So that's why they joined Acts.
Yeah.
I think as a parish, we can do a lot better job evangelizing and finding stewardship beyond sports and school events for everybody. Is it going to take a lot of hard work? Yeah.
Sure.
It goes back to when we're on team and they're well, who are you going to ask? And I'm we need a salesman to come in here. Yeah. And teach us how to sell what we're trying to do.
Here's the thing, Rome's going to have to. Because if we're saying that the whole heart and soul of this parish is CYC and the school, that's a big problem.
But think about how sad that is if that's like your identity is your kids playing
Right.
sports or in Boy
Right.
Scouts or whatever, and the second they're out of this place, you have no
Yeah.
you feel in your mind you have no
Right.
affiliation. Are you kidding me?
Well, I think it goes back to the whole understanding that, like, these are parents now who weren't catechized well in their own
Right.
life, and they probably have the same experience the
And
parents
you can
life when they
see
were
that
growing
based
up.
on each class.
Mhm.
Like one class we have, there's a lot of people that are not from here. They're from really small towns, or and then there's other classes where most of us are from around here, and it's a completely different mindset.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. You learn from what you experience. And so if you're growing up in a time where there wasn't, maybe the only engagement you had as a family is with the school and with the sports team, and that was it. I mean, I know when I was in my class, I'd say maybe half of us went to mass. Half our families went to mass at Back of the Heart. The other half was like the only association was because they went to school there, or they played on the CYC, or maybe Boy Scouts or whatever. Otherwise, you wouldn't see them.
But it's the same thing if you look at it. It's the same people coming to the school picnic. It's just like after we get out of here. It's like I don't know how many people in my class in 8th grade here, but I can tell you the 5 people I guarantee are going to be the picnic.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can tell you the 4 or 5 people that are maybes.
Yeah.
And some people are like, oh, that's ridiculous. And I'm like, it's ridiculous that you prioritize it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's ridiculous that you have it's like class reunions. It's like, well, why'd you invite Billy? It was because he was in a class.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, why not come back to St. Gabriel's on a
Right.
Friday night or a Saturday for a few hours?
Yeah.
You're not that busy.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, the same argument, why not come to Sunday Mass on an hour on Sunday morning either?
Well, exactly.
But again, I mean, this goes back to how are these people formed? And when you only have a 8th grade understanding of the faith, or maybe a 12th grade understanding of the faith, that doesn't serve you very well. That's a very immature understanding of the faith.
Well, so like the holy name thing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go to Holy Name until about 5 years ago, and I've been part of this church my whole life. But no one ever invited me. I didn't know if it was. So there's this private club on the hill, and it's at church, and you cannot go to that unless you're invited. So I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And for years I didn't go, but I probably could have read the bulletin a little more thorough or something.
All are invited.
I get it.
But that point,
But
But you don't feel comfortable.
But at the SLU's freshman class, all these kids, we just had a coffee for all the new parents going to the Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Just the other day, they're going to do the same thing where, like, you're going to be part of the dad's club and the mom's club. You know what I mean? We could do a better job of evangelizing the entire community.
Sure.
And then get the Joe Leisures and the Bittners and the people that aren't involved in the day-to-day stuff. I know you got grandchildren, but my point is like, there's no reason why everybody shouldn't know who Mike Leeper is or Wayne Merrick just because their kids don't go to school here. But if it wasn't for Acts, and it wasn't because for some reason I decided to go, I wouldn't know.
Yeah, I think Acts is a wonderful evangelization.
But it's almost like it goes back to the sales thing. Where
Right.
we need to learn how to sell St. Gabriel School, St. Gabriel coming to church, St. Gabriel Sports. We also need to learn how to sell that Acts isn't the byproduct of not having nothing else to do.
Yeah. I think sometimes though too that needs to be. Sometimes people need to be offended enough to actually understand it too. Like one thing that I don't know, but I don't know how people have reacted to this, but since the kids came back to school from Christmas, I've not done a homily at the 8 o'clock Mass on those days we have the school kids. And no one really asked me why. I think people made some conclusions weren't necessarily founded well or substantiated. Someone did reach out to me though and ask me the question. And so what I told them was, well, we haven't had many school families come to Mass on Sunday. And so it's per the germ, you're not required to give a homily on ferial days or Memorial days or even feast days, really. The only time that a homily is prescribed is on a solemnity. So Sundays and other solemnities, right? And so my thought being that if you really want to hear a homily, come on Sunday. That's your obligation anyway. So
there's
why
probably
not?
5 people that don't realize you're not doing a homily.
There's been I've had a few people who kind of said they noticed it.
But it's the normal. It's the people that are always there.
Yes, that's true.
It's
That's
not the 7 moms that are coming to listen to penance. The kid read penance. Am I wrong? I
don't know. I mean, the only one person reached out to me about it. And it's funny because it started with like, it started with, I hope you're okay. No, I'm praying for you. I'm hoping you're all right.
You haven't said anything.
Well, I know. That's what I'm saying. So the response was like, something must be wrong. That was kind of the conclusion that was made. And my response to this person was like, well, I'm doing well, but can you help me? I mean, I'll take the prayers, of course. I love that. That's great. But can you help me understand if I've been kind of communicating something which maybe indicates that I'm not doing well? And the response came, well, it was noticed that you weren't saying a homily. And I'm like, well, yeah, here's why. No one's asked why. Here's why. And the response I got back was, oh, well, that makes sense. Yeah. I'm usually not too emotionally driven. I usually have a rationale of what reason I do things. Not that I don't have any emotion, obviously I do, but I hope I don't necessarily let that rule me in many circumstances. So
you're saying Mass, but just skipping the homily's just not happening when
yeah, during the ferial day. I mean, if it's solemnity, I have to.
Yes, but
or a feast day, I would probably too. But and also sort of season. So the catch here is that once Lent starts, you have to do it every day of Lent.
Oh.
That's actually the germ. Advent and Lent are prescribed as well.
So if that person that said that comes back to you and goes, oh, now you're just doing it because of Lent, now you'll know he's really on the ball. Right?
Yeah. I think that person would understand that, I think.
But
now everyone else might think maybe
but part of this is you're trying to evangelize. It's like if you, but I would go back to saying most of them don't even know.
Probably. But then again, who's it hurting that anyway? Because they're getting what they want. They have a shorter
devil's
mass.
advocate, you could argue that the kids probably need the homily.
Maybe.
But I'm not going to ever tell you how to be.
Yeah, that may be the case. I don't know.
But I don't
know. But then again, maybe the kids might endear me more. In fact, I'm not doing that. The ones that probably don't really care, they probably appreciate the fact I'm not.
Right.
So I kind of win them over anyway.
But is God winning him over?
Yeah. True. I'm just an instrument, sure. But yeah.
Can I ask a controversial thing about Mass?
About Mass?
It's not that bad.
Okay.
So when the kids do this, isn't that what we're trying to get away from when we had those, like with, when we're trying to get more theology?
Yeah, we've had some, again, because what
Because I'm sitting there, I'm like, it's my understanding we're trying to get more traditional and.
Well, we're trying to do is really kind of, everything should flow from the Sunday Mass. So
but
whatever
isn't that
we do,
really progressive?
What are they doing? What are they
What are
doing?
you talking about?
there's I won't do it on camera, but there's an action that's done during the Alleluia by the kids, right?
That's
Yeah.
Oh.
Now,
that's the sign language,
yeah, but here's the thing. We're trying to establish. This has gone through. We're talking about the liturgy committee. This is really kind of part of this also is kind of there is still a divide between the school and the church as far as how things are going, and we're trying to resolve that. And so part of this is understanding that for certain age levels, maybe that might be something beneficial for them. Right now, I would say maybe that might be kindergarten through maybe second grade.
Well, because they were doing it the other day with the 8th graders, and the 3 8th grade boys that were doing it, they were doing it to try to get laughs.
I know.
And that's where I was like.
Right. And so that's what I'm saying. I think we should probably refrain from doing those type of things for the older grade levels because they're at a level now where they should be actually maturing their faith in a different way.
Right.
And so the music, everything should be reflected based towards that. I think hopefully maybe we have some more discussions before next year to kind of maybe get that resolved. I know that the liturgy committee has been very adamant about trying to have our weekly liturgies flow from the Sunday liturgy, meaning that whatever we do on Sunday should be reflected in the daily masses, and vice versa in many ways, right? So you won't see us ever doing that in an Alleluia at Mass on Sunday. Now, maybe if we had a particular Mass just for, maybe like First Communion. Okay, maybe you could do it then because that's directed towards that age level. But I agree with you, Jamie, that seeing 7th, 8th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 5th, 7th, 8th graders do that, that's probably not at the best level for that maturity.
Right.
Yeah. And we could probably do something a little more in line with their understanding with those things.
Well, right, and then I'll ask them, but I don't know like how, if it's explained to them what they're, because it's basically like at the lower levels there's not a kid not doing it,
right?
So they feel obligated, they
right.
have to do it,
right?
And I could argue against that.
Yeah,
but then they know that that's what that means.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Now they're
I don't know that answer. I really don't. Yeah.
Because if that's my other thing is if we're truly trying to create a non-progressive action at all of our masses, well, if kindergarten through 5th grade still doing that, that's pretty progressive. And we're sending the wrong message. And
I think part of that needs to be, there's resolution on on the horizon for that.
Well, the person in charge also came from a non-traditional church.
Yeah. So and that's what I'm saying. I'm of the mindset that we should. There's a level of progression when it comes to development, right? And so I can understand if maybe on Tuesday mornings we have the K through 4. I would even say the cutoff maybe should be 2nd grade personally, but I can understand if we have the first and kindergarten, 1st graders there. Okay, all right, fine.
Because it gets them engaged, which
it does.
I'm okay with.
And that's what I'm saying. I think that's the philosophy too. That it kind of gets them moving. It's kind of part of the posture. But when you get the older grades, you have to be understanding that the postures do matter. But the church already gives you the postures to do, right? That's part of that is when we stand, that means something. When we sit, that means something. When we kneel, that means something. And the kids should understand that at those levels of what that is.
Taught that. That's the
and that's what I'm saying. I don't know. That's the thing. Here's the thing. I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not involved with every curriculum.
There's a full job.
No,
we have a full-time job for that right now.
Right.
There's a person that's their only job.
It is, but that's just
that's a lot of money. That's what I'm saying. I think it should be there, but that's my point is, and I'm not. We have 3 men in here that went through 8 years of school,
No.
give or take, and they've got 100 and something years of experience. I'm not convinced that my 3 daughters, 5 or 6 different religion teachers, are having conversations with those 3 gentlemen. Which I'm not faulting you, but I am convinced that the one person that we pay probably at least $40,000 or $50,000 a year as our religious director, and please, I don't really care if anybody says it. I am convinced that person isn't educating those 5 religion teachers. I could not in a consistent basis to where the message, to where it's a consistent flow, to where 30 years from now, my 3 daughters and your 2 grandchildren are sitting in the same type of room going, and we have a full-time person on staff here at school.
So I will tell you just from my perspective, my approach has been since I've gotten here. Even though I have the right to go in and teach in any classroom, I do. I don't impose, and I ask to be invited. So all the teachers over there know that if they want me to come over there, I am more than willing and happy to do that.
Which I would pray that they would take advantage of that. First of all, the kids love it, especially the 8th graders. I've talked to them about it because I can have those conversations. They love it. But think about it, like if you're in there, wouldn't that give 15 or 20 minutes or 30 minutes for that teacher to go do something else?
Right.
So I will say that this past year, I have not been taken up on that option as often as I've been in the past. Now I don't know the reason why. I don't know. Maybe part of that is like out of sight, out of mind. Maybe, but I don't try to impose because I want that freedom of the teachers to actually do that. And I think you're right. I mean, that gives them some free time to do whatever they need to do. But for some reason this year that hasn't happened as much.
I would ask you, with all due respect, to figure out a way to politely impose.
And I know.
And I don't know. Maybe not impose, but.
So let's put it this way.
If you want,
I offer.
Okay.
I offer.
That's all you can do.
I offer.
Well, you know what? I think the teacher should be sitting there to hear what.
Oh, I agree with you on that. I don't think that
I don't
they
think
should
the
use an
teacher
excuse
should.
either. But I would think as stressed as some of them seem like they are at times, it would give a little
Repose.
Right.
Yeah.
Repose,
Yeah.
a little more levity to
Yeah.
it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that.
It's just an observation.
Yeah.
But I guess where I'm at is, I know just from, I haven't been able to, because my job had changed, so I'm not able to be here for Mass in the morning like I used to be able to, but when I was, it was really neat hearing the kids and father interact during the homily because they were at that level.
Mm-hmm.
They were at that level.
Right.
And it was a time where it seemed like the kids were getting a lot more interactive, and I felt like they were getting more out of it because they could freely, ask this and that or the other, or get to where they understood what the gospel was about, and how they can make that work in their daily life. Because that's the big thing. It's not just about reading the book.
Yeah.
It's about how do we put it into practice? How do we know to take it from all that time ago to today
Yeah.
in this lifestyle?
Yeah.
My observation is the relationship with the priest and the kids I'm happy with it. I think it goes back to wonder why. There's a wonder why. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
But and the problem is if we don't set a precedence, we're gonna have, because there's fairly odds are against us that you'll be moving on.
Well, let me put things in perspective. Like, so let's look for this year, for instance. I was invited to one of some of the classrooms on Wednesday mornings from about September, and then we went on a hiatus beginning of November, and I wasn't asked.
We started having some COVID spikes too, right?
Well, this was all over Zoom.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Anyway, yeah, I was not coming in the classroom. I was zooming in the. And so for whatever reason, we went through a hiatus beginning of November, and I was not contacted again by these teachers until just like last week. And I had to decline because when you're looking at the schedule coming up, well, the Wednesdays we usually hear confessions at the time with the school kids. So for the next 7 weeks, I'd be engaged on Wednesday mornings. I couldn't make it, couldn't do anything. So, okay, you're going for 2 weeks without class, 7 weeks we won't, and then we're going to come back to each other until like the end of April, which means we only have like 4 or 5 weeks left. And there's no way I'm going to be able to finish the lessons in that amount of time. So I had to decline. And it's unfortunate, but also you look back, we lost 2 months for whatever reason. I don't really know for sure why. And I don't know. I mean, part of this is, could I do a better job communicating? Of course I could. Certainly I could. But I really don't know why I haven't been invited more. I don't.
I didn't know it was over Zoom. I thought it was in person.
I would prefer in person, but
I know why.
I don't know. So but that's always a big debate. One thing I've really realized here is this isn't unique to St. Gabriel either. I think it's when any parish that has a school, there's always that divide between the parish and the school families, and who's doing what. You have overlap too, of course, right? But you almost have 2 separate entities here, right? You have the parish and you have the school, and is unfortunate. I think there's always a movement to try to, overcome that gap in many ways.
Well, Father Steve used to say it, are we a parish, are we a school?
Well, yeah, and I
We're a
think
school with a parish.
I think part of that is just kind of recognition, like, well, part of this on the there's also on the minds of the school families, like, what are you coming here for? Why are you sending your kids here?
Well, I think there's, in recent weeks, it's even more at the forefront, so people are trying to question it too, so.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's almost 8 o'clock now. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for good seeing you guys. We'll see you next week. We'll have one more this month, and we got Friends, Food, and Faith in March. So that's gonna be Mardi Gras, I think.
Mardi Gras. Gotta bring the king cake.
Is Mardi Gras a Tuesday this year?
There's something going on this weekend.
Mardi Gras is Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah, it's
March 1st is in Mardi Gras.
the hot dog races are this weekend. I just
So maybe for Friends, Food, and Faith, that's in 2 weeks. We have like a Mardi Gras thing. Let's see what we can do about that. It'll be fun. Okay, good. But next week we still have Father the Father, so come on back. We'll see you then.
Recording stopped.
Thank you.